Hello, my name is Angelo Tadeo, and for my presentation, I will be doing it on the Philippine Kamayan. The reason why I chose this is because I myself am Filipino and I don't really know that much about Kamayan or Filipino culture in general, just due to the circumstances of my family never really being able to teach me it. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to teach not only myself, but you guys as well about this communal feast. A little bit of history about the Philippines is that the Philippines were discovered and then claimed by Spain in 1521 by a man named Ferdinand Magellan. The Philippines were named after King Philip II of Spain, and a lot of Spanish culture penetrated into the Filipino culture. You could say that the Philippines are a mesh of both Spanish culture and as well as Asian culture such as Japan. Um, that is because the Japanese military has also invaded the Philippines after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and just the whole sort of infiltration in that area. But Philippines were fighting for independence during the time of the Spanish invasion, as well as during the Japanese infiltration as well. But in 1946, luckily, the Philippines has transformed into a independent republic. And you can see from the map that the Philippines are just a bunch of smaller islands that just make up a whole. Um, I have actually visited the capital, Manila, and it was pretty nice over there. It was very hot. Um, Speaking about hot, the Philippine climate and geography. The Philippines are in a tropical climate, a tropical area, meaning that a lot of the agriculture and the livestock is sort of affected by that as well. Um, Many of the islands have high temperatures, the highest reaching around 105 degrees, usually on average. There were a bunch of varied rainfall from the past, but as of 2024, right now the islands are going through a drought, so there are probably going to be a rise in temperatures, a lot more heat spikes, just due to the lack of humidity that would be from the rain. But the hot climate does allow for the Philippines to grow lots of tropical agriculture, things like commonly bananas, mangoes, and pineapples. We are also known for growing rice and sugarcane as well as coconuts. Since we are on a bunch of small islands, many of the protein that we get from animals consists of fish, but we also have farm animals as well, most commonly goat and chickens, but there are the occasional swine and cattle that would be on certain farms. I know from my experience, my family's farm had goats and chickens. So, speaking on the topic of Kamayan, what is Kamayan? Kamayan is a Filipino feast where the participants practice an act of pagkakamay. If you don't know what pagkakamay is, it's the act of eating with your hands. So, Kamayan is the communal feast that practices pagkakamay. Pagkakamay is the act of eating with your hands. So you could just do pagkakamay by yourself, but Kamayan is like a community kind of doing pagkakamay. I talk about it briefly here, but I will show an example later in the slide on what pagkakamay actually is and the act of doing it. But typically, a kamayan is presented on the middle of the table. It's just this big old presentation. I don't know if it's right for me to say, but it kind of reminds me of a more complex charcuterie board, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's wrong for me to say, but it does sort of remind me with just how pretty the presentation is of these foods, just shown in the diagram on the right. And it would be presented on top of these giant leaves. They would typically be banana leaves, sometimes breadfruit leaves, and they would be prepped by just washing them, sometimes leaving them out to dry so that it's just fully sterile and ready for food to be placed on top of it. Depending on how oily the food is, some families, I think my family also did this, they would place a sheet of paper to soak up any oils that would maybe leak past the banana leaves, and then place the banana leaves on top, and then the food. So here is a very crude example of what pagkakamay would be. So I said before in the slide, or I've shown in the slide before, that you would eat with your fingertips. You would never eat with the palm of your hands. As much as people sort of judge eating with your hands, we still try to keep it very hygienic. So we never put the fingers in our mouth when we are practicing pagkakamay. It is picked up with the tips of our fingers, and it is clenched on the tip of our fingers, as you can see on the left. And then we use our thumb. Sorry, I hit the mic. We use our thumb to sort of shovel the food from the tips of our mouth, from the tips of our fingers into our mouths. So the fingers never really go into our mouths, so we don't transfer any germs. It's just like dropping the piece of food into your mouth and just taking it one scoop at a time. We are using our hands instead of our spoons, but the spoon is still the scooping motions and the shoveling. It's very clean, I will say. I have done it before, and I've just done pagkakamay just to feel a little bit more Filipino, a little bit more in touch with myself, and I would recommend it at least once. So the history of Kamayan, it was a thing that was practiced in the past, before the Spanish, before the Japanese have really colonized and and really meshed their culture with Filipino culture. So during these expeditions, these Spanish expeditions, some of the missionaries would note that the islanders in the Philippines would be doing kamayans, and it would just be doing the act of pagkakamay. And it was tolerated during the Spanish colonization, but when the Americans saw the Filipinos doing pagkakamay, doing kamayan, it was sort of looked down upon, since the Americans were very used to using plates, utensils, having their own version of American dining, their own practices that they have used. They didn't really like the Filipinos using their hands to eat their food. But because of this, because it was a very Filipino in essence kind of action, Kamayan and pagkakamay as a whole became a very popular way to celebrate Filipino culture. Now, what kind of food is in Kamayan? There's a whole bunch of food that you could put in Kamayan. There's anything that you would want, you could just put on as a feast and it would probably be accepted. However, there are a bunch of common things that would be in kamayans that I have listed here. Most of them being the base, being the grains, garlic rice. You'd have garlic rice being placed first, and then on top of that, you would put a bunch of other items such as grilled barbecue meats, some of them being longanisa or lechon. Lechon is meat, pork specifically. I'll show some of these examples in the next slide. I'm just putting a list out here right now for you to know. Some other kinds of proteins would also be fish, such as tilapia or other dried fish. I'm sure there are other kamayans that have steamed fish. I think there was one in a future slide. There's pancit. Pancit is, I would say it's very similar to chow mein, except it's vermicelli noodles instead. We would also put other protein heavy things such as eggs, be it boiled or salt cured. They would be cut in half sometimes just for presentation reasons. There would be lumpia. If you don't know, lumpia is these very thin rolled savory pork egg rolls. And those would be the main dishes. However, you would have some smaller dishes surrounding it as well to accompany your food, such as achara, which is sweet pickled vegetables. These would be vegetables that would be carrots, daikon, very shredded up. There would even be sometimes jackfruit, anything that you could pickle, and it's a little bit on the sweet side that it really cuts through all the salty meats that were listed above. There would also be things such as fruit and vegetables, again, to sort of cut through all the salty taste that would be in the earlier lists. Things like jackfruit as well, just pure jackfruit, mango, cucumber, pineapples, and tomatoes. And then alongside that, you would have sauces that would be with your food as well, just to provide some like condiments, I guess. These things would be calamansi juice. If you don't know, calamansi is a very common Filipino citrus. It's very similar to lemons, limes. So we'd use calamansi juice to add a little bit of tang. Bagoong, if you don't know bagoong is a fermented seafood. I think it depends on what the bagoong is, but it is most commonly fish or shrimp. And that would be fermented into a paste that would be then eaten alongside all kinds of foods. Other sauces include vinegar, banana ketchup, which I recommend you guys try at least once. Banana ketchup could be very hit or miss for some. Some people don't like the sweetness, some people love it. We would also have regular fish sauce, any kind of sauces, and again, Kamayan is just the communal feast. It's very flexible, so you could really add whatever you want, and it should be fine. So here you could see these are some of the examples that were from the previous slide that I've shown pictures just so you know what they would look like. So you have the achara, the pickled vegetables, and you can see like there's some peppers, a whole bunch of kinds of vegetables or fruits that we would put and pickle. Longanisa up here, these are like sweet sausage links. They're most commonly sweet, but I know there's a place in Ilocos where they have Ilocano longanisa. That one is more savory and tangy rather than the sweet counterpart that is shown here. So you can see this is the pancit. This is the one that uses the vermicelli noodles. I'm sure that sometimes they mix very thin egg noodles as well, but it's a whole array of just fried noodles. And you can see the bagoong down here. I believe this is the shrimp bagoong. They're using a green mango, to eat with this one. And then lechon kawali. Lechon is pork, and this one is like a broiled pork, so it's very crispy, very juicy, and like fatty, but very good. And these plus any other kinds of meats and like grains would just be put on a pile for the Kamayan. As you can see, these are some different types of Kamayan presentations. You could see the consistent just rice with the pancit, and then other pieces of meat would like adorn the plate, basically. You can see these are very colorful, and they'd be sectioned off so that everyone would at least get equal access to certain types of food. So it's very spread out. Now, why do people do Kamayan? Many people practice Kamayan for a bunch of reasons. Some of them really like the feeling of really touching the food and having a connection to that food. You just have a whole different experience if you are using your hands to eat rather than using an extension of your hand, such as like a spoon or a fork, or using plates. Just really interacting with the food is an appeal for some people as to why they do Kamayan or practice pagkakamay as a whole. People like to feel connected to Filipino culture, and Kamayan is a practice that wasn't influenced by any colonial periods that came after. It's known as a very Filipino like essence kind of thing, Kamayan and pagkakamay. And because it's so intimate, these communal feasts would be very popular for birthdays or other social events, gatherings. I have a sister who has a friend, and her husband wanted to surprise her with pagkakamay and a Kamayan feast for her birthday. So that was really fun. She got to really do that experience and just, get closer as like a group of friends. So that's a very popular reason why people do Kamayan as well. And that is it for my presentation. These is a list of my sources that I have used. A lot of them had to do with Filipino geography, some of them talking about other people's reasons why they celebrate Kamayan, other people's reasons as to what Kamayan is to them. And I hope this was very helpful, and thank you so much.